Dr. Sarah Martinez had always believed that her medical career would take her to many places, but she never imagined it would lead her to the remote mountains of Afghanistan. As a trauma surgeon with 15 years of experience, she had volunteered for a humanitarian mission with Doctors Without Borders. The call had come at 3 a.m, and within hours, she found herself boarding a military helicopter bound for a village that had been cut off from the world for weeks. The helicopter ride was unlike anything Sarah had experienced before. The landscape below was both beautiful and terrifying, with jagged peaks that seemed to touch the sky and valleys so deep they disappeared into shadow. The pilot, Captain Mike Rodriguez, kept his eyes focused ahead while the co-pilot checked their coordinates every few minutes. Behind Sarah sat 3 other medical professionals: Dr. James Wilson, a pediatrician from Boston, Nurse Rebecca Chen, who specialized in emergency care, and Dr. Abdul Rahman, a local doctor who would serve as their translator and cultural liaison. The mission was supposed to be straightforward. A landslide had trapped dozens of villagers in the remote settlement of Karabad, and the local authorities had been unable to reach them due to blocked roads and unstable terrain. Satellite images showed that several buildings had been damaged, and there were reports of casualties. The team's job was to provide immediate medical assistance and help coordinate evacuations if necessary. As they flew deeper into the mountains, the weather began to change. What had started as a clear morning soon turned overcast, with thick clouds rolling in from the west. Captain Rodriguez's voice crackled through their headsets, informing them that they were approaching the landing zone. Sarah looked out the window and saw a small clearing surrounded by steep rocky walls. The village itself was barely visible, nestled in a narrow valley below. The helicopter began its descent, and Sarah felt her stomach lurch as they dropped altitude quickly. The landing was rougher than expected, with the aircraft bouncing twice before settling on the uneven ground. As the rotors began to slow, Captain Rodriguez turned to address the medical team. "Listen up, people. We've got about 4 hours of daylight left and the weather's not looking good. I need to keep the engines running because if this fog gets any thicker, we might not be able to take off until tomorrow. Stay in radio contact and be ready to move fast if I call for immediate evacuation." Dr. Wilson was the first to unbuckle his harness and gather his medical supplies. He had been on similar missions before and knew the importance of moving quickly and efficiently. Nurse Chen followed closely behind, carrying the emergency medical kit that contained everything from antibiotics to surgical instruments. Dr. Rahman checked his translation device one more time before stepping toward the door. Sarah was about to follow them when she noticed something that made her pause. In the distance, barely visible through the swirling dust kicked up by the helicopter blades, she could see figures moving toward them. At first, she thought they were villagers coming to meet the medical team, but as her eyes adjusted to the hazy conditions, she realized that something was different about the way they were moving. The figures weren't walking normally. Instead, they seemed to be carrying something heavy between them, moving slowly and carefully across the rocky terrain. Sarah squinted and could make out what appeared to be a group of women, their traditional clothing making them stand out against the barren landscape. They were heading directly toward the helicopter, but their progress was labored and deliberate. Captain Rodriguez noticed her hesitation and followed her gaze. He reached for his binoculars and studied the approaching group for several moments before lowering them with a concerned expression. "Doc, we've got incoming. Looks like they're bringing casualties to us instead of waiting for us to reach the village. That could be a good sign or a very bad sign, depending on how you look at it." Sarah nodded and quickly checked her medical bag to ensure she had everything she might need for immediate triage. The other team members had already disembarked and were setting up a temporary treatment area using supplies from the helicopter. The flat area where they had landed was small but adequate for basic medical procedures. As the group of villagers drew closer, Sarah could see that they were indeed carrying someone. The person appeared to be wrapped in colorful blankets and was being transported on what looked like a makeshift stretcher constructed from wooden poles and fabric. The women carrying the stretcher moved with the careful precision of people who understood the gravity of their burden. Dr. Rahman approached the group first, speaking in the local language and gesturing for them to bring their patient to the treatment area. The villagers responded with rapid, excited speech that Sarah couldn't understand, but their body language suggested both urgency and relief at seeing the medical team. Sarah watched as they carefully lowered the stretcher to the ground. The person wrapped in the blankets was completely covered, making it impossible to determine their condition or even their identity. One of the village women, who appeared to be the eldest of the group, began speaking rapidly to Dr. Rahman while pointing toward the wrapped figure. Dr. Rahman's expression grew increasingly serious as he listened to the woman's explanation. He asked several questions in return, and the woman's responses seemed to surprise him. He turned to Sarah and the other team members with a look of confusion and concern. "They're saying this person was found in the landslide area, but there's something unusual about the circumstances. The woman won't let me examine the patient until she speaks with the lead doctor. She says it's very important that we understand the situation before we proceed." Sarah approached the elderly woman and gestured to herself, indicating that she was the lead physician. The woman studied her for a moment, then began speaking in her native language while maintaining direct eye contact with Sarah. Even without understanding the words, Sarah could sense the weight and importance of what was being communicated. Dr. Rahman translated as the woman spoke. "She says they found this person 3 days ago, buried under rocks and debris from the landslide. But here's the strange part. She claims this person was protecting something when they found them, something that might change everything. We think we know about what happened in that village." The woman gestured toward the wrapped figure and said something else in a tone that suggested both reverence and urgency. Dr. Rahman listened carefully before turning back to Sarah. "She wants you to be the one to unwrap the blankets. She says you'll understand why when you see what this person was protecting." Sarah knelt beside the stretcher, her hands trembling slightly as she reached for the edge of the colorful blankets. The elderly village woman watched her intently, as did the other members of the medical team. The atmosphere had grown heavy with anticipation, and even Captain Rodriguez had stepped away from the helicopter to observe what was happening. As Sarah carefully pulled back the first layer of fabric, she could see that whoever lay beneath had been wrapped with extraordinary care. The blankets were arranged in multiple layers, each one folded precisely to provide maximum protection and warmth. The person underneath appeared to be unconscious, but Sarah could detect the faint rise and fall of breathing. Dr. Wilson moved closer with his stethoscope ready, while Nurse Chen prepared basic monitoring equipment. Dr. Rahman continued to speak quietly with the village women, gathering more information about how and where this person had been found. The details he was hearing seemed to puzzle him more with each revelation. When Sarah peeled back the second layer of blankets, she could see the patient more clearly. It was a young woman, probably in her early 20s, with dark hair that was matted with dust and debris. Her skin was pale, and there were visible signs of dehydration, but her vital signs appeared stable. More importantly, Sarah could see that the woman's arms were wrapped around something, holding it protectively against her chest even in her unconscious state. "She hasn't let go of whatever she's holding since we found her," Dr. Rahman translated as one of the village women spoke. "They tried to take it from her to make her more comfortable, but every time they attempted to move her arms, she would cry out in distress, even though she never fully woke up." Sarah examined the woman's arms and hands more closely. Her grip was remarkably strong for someone who appeared to be suffering from exposure and dehydration. Whatever she was protecting was wrapped in a small piece of cloth, and it was held so tightly against her body that Sarah couldn't make out what it might be. Dr. Wilson checked the woman's pulse and blood pressure, while Nurse Chen prepared an IV line to address the obvious dehydration. The patient's vital signs were weak but stable, suggesting that while she was in serious condition, she was not in immediate danger of death. However, her prolonged unconsciousness was concerning, and Sarah knew they needed to get her to a proper medical facility as soon as possible. "We need to start fluids and see if we can get her conscious enough to communicate," Sarah told her team. "But I'm curious about what she's holding. If she's maintained that grip for 3 days while unconscious, it must be incredibly important to her." Dr. Rahman spoke with the elderly village woman again, asking for more details about the circumstances of the rescue. The woman's response was lengthy and animated, and she gestured frequently toward the mountains and then back to the wrapped bundle in the patient's arms. "This is getting more interesting," Dr. Rahman said as he turned back to the team. "She says they found this woman in what used to be the village school. The building collapsed during the landslide, but when they were digging through the rubble looking for survivors, they heard crying. Not from this woman, but from whatever she's holding. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine as the implications of those words sank in. If there had been crying coming from the bundle, and if this woman had been protecting it with such determination, there was only one logical explanation. Nurse Chen looked up from preparing the IV and caught Sarah's eye. "Are you thinking what I'm thinking?" she asked quietly. Sarah nodded slowly. "But we need to be sure before we make any assumptions. Let's get some fluids into her and see if we can bring her around enough to assess the situation properly." As Nurse Chen inserted the IV line, the unconscious woman stirred slightly. Her grip on the bundle tightened even more, and she made a soft sound that was somewhere between a moan and a whisper. Sarah leaned closer to see if she could make out any words. "Easy, easy," Sarah said softly, placing a gentle hand on the woman's forehead. "You're safe now. We're doctors and we're here to help you." The woman's eyes fluttered open for just a moment, and Sarah could see they were filled with confusion and fear. She tried to speak, but only managed a weak whisper before her eyes closed again. However, in that brief moment of consciousness, her first instinct had been to check that the bundle was still secure in her arms. Dr. Wilson finished his examination and pulled Sarah aside. "She's severely dehydrated and probably hasn't eaten in days, but there's no sign of serious trauma. Whatever happened during the landslide, she managed to avoid major injury. But Sarah, I'm seeing some signs that suggest she might have recently given birth." Sarah felt her heart rate increase as the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. She looked back at the unconscious woman, then at the carefully wrapped bundle she refused to release, and then at the concerned faces of the village women who had brought her to them. "Dr. Rahman, ask them exactly when this landslide occurred and if anyone from the village is missing," Sarah instructed. "And ask them if they knew this woman before they found her." Dr. Rahman engaged in another lengthy conversation with the village women. Their responses seemed to surprise him, and he asked several follow-up questions before turning back to the medical team. "The landslide happened 5 days ago, not 3 days ago like I thought earlier. They found her 3 days ago, which means she was trapped under the debris for 2 full days. And here's the most interesting part. None of these women recognize her. She's not from their village." Captain Rodriguez, who had been listening to the conversation while monitoring his radio for weather updates, approached the group. "Doc, we've got a problem. The weather's deteriorating faster than expected, and I'm getting reports of severe storms moving in from the west. We need to make a decision about evacuation soon, or we might be stuck here overnight." Sarah looked at the unconscious woman, then at the bundle she was protecting so fiercely. Every instinct she had as a doctor told her that whatever was in that cloth was alive and needed immediate medical attention. But she also knew that attempting to separate the woman from whatever she was holding could cause her severe psychological distress, even in her current state. "Give me 5 more minutes," Sarah told the pilot. "I need to see what we're dealing with here before we move her." Sarah knelt beside the woman again and spoke to her in a calm, reassuring voice. "I'm Dr. Martinez. You're safe now and we're going to take care of you. I need to check on what you're holding to make sure it's okay too. Can you hear me?" The woman's eyes opened again, this time focusing on Sarah's face. She tried to speak and Sarah leaned closer to hear her whispered words. "Please," the woman managed to say in accented English. "Please don't take her. She's all I have left." Sarah's breath caught in her throat as the confirmation of what she had suspected hit her fully. The bundle contained a baby, and this woman had somehow managed to keep the child alive for days while trapped under tons of debris. "I'm not going to take her," Sarah assured the woman, "but I need to make sure she's healthy. Will you let me check on her while you hold her?" The woman studied Sarah's face for a long moment, then slowly nodded. With trembling hands, she began to loosen her grip just enough to allow Sarah to examine the bundle without removing it from her arms. With infinite care, Sarah began to examine the bundle while the mother maintained her protective hold. As she gently moved aside the soft cloth wrapping, Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Inside was indeed a baby, but this was unlike any rescue scenario she had ever encountered in her years of medical practice. The infant appeared to be only a few days old, possibly born during or shortly after the landslide. Despite the traumatic circumstances, the baby's condition seemed remarkably stable. Her tiny chest rose and fell with regular breathing, and her skin, while pale, showed good circulation. Sarah could hardly believe that such a young infant had survived days of exposure in the harsh mountain environment. "Dr. Wilson, I need you to see this," Sarah called quietly to the pediatrician. "And Nurse Chen, please prepare the infant warming kit from the helicopter." Dr. Wilson knelt beside Sarah and began his own assessment of the baby. His experienced eyes quickly took in the infant's condition, and Sarah could see both amazement and concern in his expression. "This baby can't be more than 72 hours old," he whispered to Sarah. "The umbilical cord stump is still fresh, and there are clear signs this was a recent birth. But Sarah, look at this." Dr. Wilson carefully indicated something that made Sarah's eyes widen. The baby was wrapped not just in cloth, but in what appeared to be the woman's own clothing. She had literally given up her outer garments to keep the infant warm and protected. Even more remarkably, it was clear that the woman had been providing nutrition to the baby throughout their ordeal, despite her own dire condition. "She's been nursing this baby while trapped under debris for 2 days," Dr. Wilson continued in amazement. "The level of maternal instinct and determination this represents is extraordinary." Sarah looked up at the mother, whose eyes were now open and alert, watching every move the medical team made. Despite her obvious exhaustion and dehydration, the woman's focus was entirely on ensuring her baby's safety. "What's your name?" Sarah asked gently. "Amara," the woman replied in a weak voice. "Amara Hussein. This is my daughter Zara." Dr. Rahman spoke to Amara in her native language, and she responded with obvious relief at being able to communicate more easily. The conversation between them was lengthy, and Sarah could see Dr. Rahman's expression growing more serious with each exchange. "Her story is incredible," Dr. Rahman finally told the team. "She's not from the local village. She was traveling through the mountains when her labor began unexpectedly. She sought shelter in what she thought was an abandoned building, not knowing it was the village school. She gave birth alone just hours before the landslide hit." Captain Rodriguez approached the group again, his expression urgent. "Docs, I hate to interrupt, but we really need to make a decision about evacuation. The storm front is moving faster than predicted, and if we don't leave in the next 30 minutes, we're going to be grounded until morning." Sarah looked at baby Zara, then at Amara, then at the darkening sky above them. The infant needed specialized medical care that could only be provided at a hospital, and Amara required immediate treatment for dehydration and exhaustion. But the approaching storm presented its own dangers. "Can the helicopter safely carry both patients in these conditions?" Sarah asked the pilot. "It's not the weight that's the problem, Doc, it's the weather. We're looking at high winds and zero visibility within the hour. But if we're going to go, we need to go now." Dr. Wilson completed his examination of baby Zara and turned to Sarah with his assessment. "The infant is stable but needs to be in a controlled environment soon. She's showing early signs of hypothermia, and while her mother has done an amazing job keeping her alive, she needs proper medical support." Nurse Chen had prepared the infant warming blanket and approached Amara carefully. "We need to wrap the baby in this special blanket to help regulate her temperature during the flight," she explained through Dr. Rahman's translation. Amara looked terrified at the prospect of anyone else handling her daughter, but after Dr. Rahman explained the medical necessity, she reluctantly allowed Nurse Chen to add the warming blanket to baby Zara's wrappings. As the medical team prepared both patients for transport, Sarah couldn't help but marvel at what she was witnessing. The bond between Amara and her daughter was unlike anything she had seen in her years of practice. Even in her weakened state, Amara's every movement was calculated to protect and comfort her child. "Dr. Rahman, ask Amara if there's anyone we should contact. Any family who should know she and the baby are safe," Sarah requested. The conversation that followed was heartbreaking. Through Dr. Rahman's translation, Amara explained that she had been fleeing an arranged marriage in her home village. She had no one to contact and nowhere to go. The baby she had protected so fiercely was literally all she had in the world. Dr. Wilson and Nurse Chen had finished preparing both patients for transport when one of the village women approached Dr. Rahman with urgent-sounding speech. After listening to her, Dr. Rahman's expression grew troubled. "What is it?" Sarah asked. "She says there's something else we need to know about Amara and the baby. Something they didn't mention before because they weren't sure it was important." The village woman continued speaking, gesturing toward the mountains and then toward Amara. Dr. Rahman listened intently before translating. When they found Amara and the baby, they weren't alone. There was an elderly woman with them who had died, apparently from injuries sustained in the landslide. But before she died, she told the villagers something that they didn't understand at the time. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the dropping temperature. What did she say? The elderly woman claimed that Amara wasn't just any refugee. She said Amara was carrying something more than just a baby. She was carrying hope for her people. Captain Rodriguez was now signaling urgently from the helicopter. The wind was picking up significantly and Sarah could see the rotors beginning to sway as gusts hit the aircraft. "We need to move now," the pilot called over the increasing wind noise. "I can't guarantee we'll be able to take off if we wait any longer." Sarah made the decision that would haunt her thoughts for years to come. Load them both. We're getting them out of here. As the medical team carefully lifted Amara and baby Zara toward the helicopter, Sarah noticed something that made her pause. The elderly village woman who had first brought them the patients was trying to give Dr. Rahman something. It appeared to be a small leather pouch, and she was speaking urgently as she pressed it into his hands. Dr. Rahman looked at the pouch, then at the woman, then at Amara. He said something in the local language, and the village woman nodded emphatically before stepping back. What was that about? Sarah called over the wind as they secured the patients in the helicopter. She said this belonged to the elderly woman who died with Amara and the baby. She wanted to make sure it went with them, Dr. Rahman replied, tucking the pouch into his medical bag. As the helicopter lifted off into the turbulent sky, Sarah looked down at the village women who had brought Amara and Zara to them. They stood in a small group, watching the aircraft disappear into the storm clouds. Sarah had the strange feeling that she was carrying away something far more significant than two rescue patients. The flight back to base was harrowing, with the helicopter buffeted by strong winds and flying through areas of near-zero visibility. But throughout the turbulent journey, Amara never loosened her protective hold on baby Zara, and the infant remained remarkably calm despite the chaos around them. The helicopter touched down at the military medical facility just as the storm reached its full intensity. Rain lashed against the aircraft's windows and lightning illuminated the dark evening sky. Sarah and her team worked quickly to transfer Amara and baby Zara to the emergency medical unit, where a full team of specialists was waiting to receive them. Inside the brightly lit medical facility, the contrast to their recent mountain rescue was stark. Sarah watched as Amara's eyes widened at the sight of the modern equipment and the team of medical professionals surrounding them. Despite her exhaustion, she maintained her protective grip on Zara, clearly overwhelmed by the sudden change in environment. Dr. Elizabeth Harper, the facility's chief pediatrician, approached the group with gentle confidence. She had been briefed on the unusual circumstances of the rescue and was prepared for the delicate situation of treating both mother and infant together. "Amara," Dr. Harper said through Dr. Rahman's translation, "we're going to take very good care of both you and your daughter, but we need to examine you both separately to make sure you're both healthy. I promise we won't take Zara away from you." The medical team had set up adjoining examination areas specifically to accommodate Amara's need to maintain visual contact with her baby. Sarah watched as Amara reluctantly allowed the nurses to help her onto an examination table while keeping Zara in her arms. As Dr. Harper began her assessment of baby Zara, Sarah was struck by the infant's alertness. Despite being only days old and having survived an ordeal that would challenge much older children, Zara's eyes were bright and responsive. She seemed to study the faces around her with unusual intensity. "This is remarkable," Dr. Harper murmured to Sarah as she conducted her examination. "Not only is this baby in surprisingly good health considering the circumstances, but her development appears to be advanced for her age. Her muscle tone is excellent, her reflexes are strong, and her alertness level is exceptional." Meanwhile, Dr. Wilson was examining Amara and administering IV fluids to address her dehydration. Blood tests revealed that despite her ordeal, her overall health was stable. What impressed the medical team most was that despite her own physical stress, she had somehow managed to maintain sufficient nutrition to continue breastfeeding. Zara, throughout their imprisonment under the debris, Sarah stepped away from the immediate medical activities to speak with Dr. Rahman about the leather pouch the village woman had given them. They found a quiet corner where they could examine its contents without disturbing the mother and baby. Dr. Rahman carefully opened the aged leather pouch and extracted several items. There was a small, intricately carved wooden pendant, some folded papers covered in writing that Sarah couldn't read, and what appeared to be a very old photograph. "Can you read any of this?" Sarah asked, indicating the papers. Dr. Rahman studied the writing carefully, his expression growing increasingly serious as he read. "This is fascinating, Sarah. These appear to be genealogical records, family histories written in several different languages. And this pendant," he examined the carved wooden piece, "bears symbols that are significant in certain mountain communities." Sarah looked at the photograph, which showed a young woman holding a baby, standing in front of what appeared to be an ancient building or temple. The woman bore a striking resemblance to Amara. "Dr. Rahman, show this photograph to Amara when she's feeling stronger. I have a feeling these items might be more important than we initially thought." As the evening progressed, both Amara and Zara continued to stabilize under medical care. Amara had accepted small amounts of food and was responding well to rehydration treatment. Baby Zara had been given a thorough pediatric examination and was pronounced to be in remarkably good health for an infant who had endured such trauma. Dr. Harper approached Sarah with Zara's test results. "I've never seen anything quite like this," she admitted. "This baby's blood work is perfect. Her neurological responses are exceptionally strong, and her overall development seems to be proceeding at an accelerated pace. It's as if she's been protected by something beyond just her mother's care." Sarah nodded thoughtfully. Throughout her medical career, she had seen many cases that defied easy explanation. But there was something about Amara and Zara that felt truly extraordinary. Later that evening, when Amara was awake and alert, Dr. Rahman approached her with the leather pouch. Her reaction was immediate and profound. Tears began streaming down her face as she recognized the items, and she spoke rapidly in her native language. "These belonged to my grandmother," Dr. Rahman translated. "She died when Amara was very young, but she had always told Amara that someday these items would be important for her family's future. Amara thought they had been lost when she fled her village." Sarah examined the pendant more closely. The carving was incredibly detailed, depicting what appeared to be a mother and child surrounded by protective symbols. The craftsmanship was extraordinary, suggesting it was very old and probably quite valuable, at least culturally. "Ask Amara if she knows why the elderly woman who died in the landslide had these items," Sarah requested. The conversation that followed revealed another layer to the already complex story. Amara explained that the elderly woman had been a distant relative who had been searching for her. Apparently, Amara's departure from her village had not gone unnoticed, and various family members had been trying to locate her. "But why?" Sarah asked. "What was so important about finding her?" Dr. Rahman translated Amara's response, and his expression grew thoughtful. "She says her grandmother used to tell stories about their family line, about women who were chosen to preserve certain traditions and knowledge. Amara always thought they were just stories, but the elderly woman who died seemed to believe they were real." Dr. Harper joined their conversation, having finished her final examination of baby Zara. "I have to share something with you all," she said. "I've been a pediatrician for 20 years, and I've never encountered an infant with Zara's characteristics. Her development is not just advanced. It's almost as if she's aware of things that newborns shouldn't be able to comprehend." Sarah looked over at baby Zara, who was sleeping peacefully in her mother's arms. In the soft lighting of the medical facility, the infant's face seemed to glow with an inner serenity that was both beautiful and mysterious. "What do you mean exactly?" Sarah asked Dr. Harper. "When I was examining her, she maintained eye contact in a way that was almost communicative, and when her mother speaks to her, she responds with facial expressions and sounds that are far more sophisticated than what you'd expect from a 3-day-old baby." Dr. Rahman had been quietly reading more of the papers from the leather pouch. He looked up at the group with an expression of amazement. "You're not going to believe what these documents say," he announced. "According to these family records, Amara's bloodline can be traced back over 300 years, and there are specific references to women in her family who were born during times of great upheaval and who were said to possess special qualities." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "What kind of special qualities?" "The documents speak of women who could bring peace to warring communities, who possessed wisdom beyond their years, and who were destined to be protectors of their people." It sounds mystical, but Sarah, the dates and locations mentioned in these records correspond to actual historical events in this region. Captain Rodriguez appeared in the doorway of the medical facility, having completed his post-flight checks and weather monitoring. "Doc, I wanted to let you know that the storm has passed and we've received some interesting communications from the local authorities." Sarah looked up from the documents. What kind of communications? Word has gotten out about your rescue of the mother and baby. Apparently, several different groups are claiming that these two are significant to their communities. We've had requests from village elders, tribal leaders, and even some government officials who want to meet with them. Sarah looked at Amara, who was listening to the conversation with growing concern in her eyes. Even without understanding all the English being spoken around her, she seemed to sense that her and Zara's situation was becoming complicated. The next morning brought unexpected visitors to the medical facility. Sarah arrived early to check on Amara and Zara, only to find Dr. Rahman deep in conversation with a group of elderly men who had traveled from various mountain villages. Their presence seemed to both comfort and worry Amara, who watched their animated discussion with careful attention. "What's happening here?" Sarah asked Dr. Rahman quietly. "These are tribal elders from 3 different communities," he explained. Word spread quickly about the rescue, and they've come to see Amara and the baby for themselves. "Sarah, what they're telling me is extraordinary." Dr. Rahman introduced Sarah to the eldest of the visitors, a dignified man named Hassan, who appeared to be in his 80s. Through translation, Hassan explained that his grandmother had told him stories about a prophecy that had been passed down through generations. According to Hassan, the prophecy spoke of a child who would be born during a time of great natural disaster, who would survive against impossible odds, and who would possess the ability to bridge differences between conflicting groups. The child would be protected by a mother whose love would overcome even the forces of nature. Sarah listened to this explanation with growing amazement. While she was naturally skeptical of prophecies and mystical claims, she couldn't deny the remarkable circumstances of Zara's birth and survival. "Ask them why they believe Zara is the child from their prophecy," Sarah requested. The conversation that followed involved multiple elders speaking simultaneously, each adding details to the story. Dr. Rahman worked to translate the complex discussion, his own expression showing increasing wonder. "They say there are several signs that identify the prophesied child," Dr. Rahman explained. "First, the timing coincides with predictions their ancestors made about when this child would be born. Second, the circumstances of survival in the landslide match the details of the prophecy. But most importantly, they say the baby bears a physical mark that was described in their ancient stories." Dr. Harper, who had been quietly observing the discussion, stepped forward. "What kind of physical mark?" One of the elders spoke directly to Dr. Harper, pointing to baby Zara and then making gestures that seemed to indicate something on the infant's body. Dr. Rahman translated. "He's referring to a birthmark. They want to examine the baby to see if she has the mark that was described in their prophecy." Amara had been listening to this entire conversation with growing agitation. She spoke rapidly to Dr. Rahman in her native language, her voice filled with both fear and protectiveness. "She's concerned about what will happen to her and Zara if these claims are true," Dr. Rahman explained. "She's afraid that people will try to take her daughter away from her, or that they'll be forced into roles they don't want." Sarah approached Amara's bedside and spoke to her directly, even though she knew Dr. Rahman would need to translate. "Amara, no one is going to take Zara away from you. Whatever these men believe about prophecies or special destinies, you are Zara's mother, and that bond is sacred. We will protect that relationship." Dr. Rahman translated Sarah's words, and Amara's expression showed relief, though worry remained in her eyes. Dr. Harper addressed the group of elders. "If you want to examine the baby for this birthmark, it needs to be done in a medical setting with proper precautions. The infant is only days old and needs to be handled carefully." The elders agreed to Dr. Harper's conditions, and arrangements were made for a careful examination. Amara insisted on holding Zara throughout the process, which the medical team accommodated. As Dr. Harper gently examined baby Zara, Sarah watched the faces of the tribal elders. Their expressions grew increasingly animated as the examination progressed, and several of them began speaking in excited whispers. "There," Dr. Harper said quietly, indicating a small area on Zara's left shoulder. "There's a birthmark here, but it's quite small and subtle." The elders leaned forward to look, and their reaction was immediate and profound. Several of them began speaking simultaneously, their voices filled with awe and reverence. Dr. Rahman listened carefully before turning to the medical team. "They say the birthmark matches exactly what was described in their prophecy. It's shaped like a tree with roots and branches, which according to their beliefs represents the connection between earth and sky, between past and future. Sarah examined the birthmark herself. It was indeed shaped somewhat like a tree, though she would have described it as a fairly common type of birthmark that many children are born with. However, she had to admit that the detail and clarity of the mark was unusual for such a young infant. Hassan, the eldest of the visitors, approached Amara and spoke to her in gentle, respectful tones. His words seemed to calm her fears somewhat, and she responded with questions of her own. Dr. Rahman translated their conversation. Hassan is explaining that if Zara is indeed the prophesied child, it doesn't mean she will be taken from her mother. Instead, it means that both of them will be honored and protected by all the mountain communities. They see Amara not as just a mother, but as the guardian of someone very special. Dr. Harper completed her examination and pronounced Zara to be in perfect health. The infant seemed completely unperturbed by all the attention, sleeping peacefully through most of the discussion. Captain Rodriguez appeared again, this time with more urgent news. Docs, we've got a situation developing. Word about the baby has spread beyond the local communities. We're getting inquiries from international media, and there are reports that various groups are mobilizing to either claim or protect the child. Sarah felt a surge of concern. What kind of groups? Everything from religious organizations to political factions to academic researchers who are interested in the historical and cultural implications of the situation. The local government is also getting involved, and they're asking questions about the legal status of both the mother and the baby. The tribal elders seem to understand the gravity of the situation even without translation. Hassan spoke urgently to Dr. Rahman, gesturing toward Amara and Zara. Hassan says they want to offer Amara and Zara sanctuary in their communities, Dr. Rahman translated. They believe the mountain villages can provide protection from outside interference, while allowing the child to grow up safely with her mother. Amara listened to this offer with evident relief. The prospect of finding a community where she and Zara would be welcomed and protected was clearly appealing to her. Dr. Harper pulled Sarah aside for a private conversation. Sarah, I need to share something with you that I haven't mentioned to the others. During my examination of Zara, I noticed something unusual in her neurological responses. Sarah felt her heart rate increase. What kind of unusual responses? Her neural activity is remarkably advanced for a newborn. The patterns I'm seeing are more consistent with a much older infant. It's as if her brain is developing at an accelerated rate. Sarah stared at Dr. Harper in amazement. Are you saying there might be some truth to these claims about her being special? I'm saying that from a purely medical standpoint, this baby is exhibiting characteristics that I've never seen before. Whether that has anything to do with prophecies or mystical beliefs, I can't say, but there's definitely something remarkable about her development. Meanwhile, the discussion between Amara and the tribal elders had continued, and it was clear that important decisions were being made. Dr. Rahman had been facilitating the conversation, and he turned to Sarah with an update. Amara has agreed to accept the elders' offer of sanctuary, but only if certain conditions are met. She wants assurance that she and Zara will be free to leave if they choose, that Zara will receive proper medical care and education, and that they won't be forced into any roles or responsibilities they don't want to accept. Hassan nodded gravely as these conditions were translated to him, and he responded with what appeared to be formal acceptance of Amara's terms. Sarah realized that they were witnessing something historically significant. Whether or not anyone believed in the prophecy, the fact remained that these communities were coming together to protect and honor a young mother and her newborn child. In a region often torn by conflict and division, Amara and Zara had somehow become a symbol of unity and hope. 3 days later, as Sarah prepared to accompany Amara and Zara to their new home in the mountain communities, she reflected on how dramatically her routine medical mission had transformed into something far more significant. The international attention surrounding the story had grown beyond anyone's expectations, but the tribal elders had successfully negotiated with local authorities to ensure that Amara and Zara's privacy and safety would be respected. Dr. Rahman had spent considerable time working with linguists and historians to translate and verify the documents found in the leather pouch. What they discovered was remarkable. The papers contained detailed genealogical records that traced Amara's family lineage back to a woman named Zara al-Jabali, who had lived in the 1600s and was renowned for her ability to mediate between warring tribes. The historical accuracy of these records is astounding, Dr. Rahman explained to Sarah as they prepared for the journey. We've been able to cross-reference many of the names and dates with official historical documents. This isn't folklore or mythology. This is documented family history spanning centuries. Sarah examined the ancient pendant once more before carefully placing it back in the leather pouch. The craftsmanship was extraordinary, and she had learned from the historians that the symbols carved into the wood represented concepts of protection, wisdom, and unity. It was a tangible link to generations of women who had played important roles in their communities. Baby Zara had continued to thrive under medical observation, and Dr. Harper's final examination had confirmed her earlier assessments. The infant's development remained remarkably advanced, and her alertness and responsiveness continued to amaze the medical staff. I've documented everything carefully, Dr. Harper told Sarah. Whatever the future holds for this child, there will be a complete medical record of her early development. I have a feeling that record might become historically significant someday. Amara had gained strength and confidence over the past few days. The knowledge that she and Zara would be welcomed and protected by the mountain communities had lifted a tremendous burden from her shoulders. She had begun to speak more openly about her experiences and her hopes for the future. Through Dr. Rahman's translation, Amara had shared more details about her grandmother's stories and the family traditions she had grown up with. Many of these stories aligned remarkably well with the prophecies the tribal elders had described, suggesting that the knowledge had been preserved in multiple forms across different communities. Captain Rodriguez had arranged for a special flight to transport Amara and Zara to their new home. Unlike their dramatic rescue from the mountains, this journey would be carefully planned and conducted in optimal weather conditions. As they prepared to board the helicopter, Sarah was surprised to see representatives from multiple international organizations waiting to witness their departure. There were diplomats, anthropologists, journalists, and religious leaders who had traveled from around the world to learn about the remarkable story of survival and cultural significance that had emerged from a routine rescue. Mission Hassan and the other tribal elders had also arrived to escort Amara and Zara to their new home. They had brought traditional clothing for both mother and child, beautifully crafted garments that reflected the cultural heritage they were now being invited to join. Dr. Rahman had decided to accompany them on this final journey, having become deeply invested in understanding the cultural and historical implications of their discovery. His expertise in the local languages and customs made him an invaluable bridge between the medical team and the mountain communities. As Sarah helped Amara and Zara board the helicopter, she noticed something that made her pause. Baby Zara, who was now 5 days old, seemed to be looking directly at her with an expression of awareness that was remarkable for such a young infant. For a moment, Sarah had the strange sensation that the baby was somehow acknowledging her role in their rescue and expressing gratitude. "You've been amazing through all of this," Sarah told Amara as they settled into their seats. "The strength and love you've shown for Zara is truly inspiring." Dr. Rahman translated Sarah's words, and Amara's response was heartfelt and emotional. "She says she will never forget what you and your team did for them," Dr. Rahman interpreted. "She wants you to know that if the stories about Zara prove to be true, you will always be remembered as the person who helped bring hope to the mountains." The flight to the mountain communities was smooth and peaceful, a stark contrast to their dramatic rescue just days earlier. As they flew over the rugged landscape, Sarah could see small groups of people gathered in villages throughout the region, apparently waiting to catch a glimpse of the helicopter carrying Amara and Zara to their new home. The landing site was a large clearing surrounded by representatives from multiple tribal communities. Hundreds of people had gathered to welcome Amara and Zara, and the atmosphere was one of celebration and reverence. Traditional musicians played welcoming songs, and children from various villages had prepared flowers and gifts for the new arrivals. As they stepped off the helicopter, Sarah was struck by the profound sense of community and unity that surrounded them. People who had historically maintained separation between their various tribal groups were coming together to honor and protect a young mother and her infant daughter. Hassan approached Amara and spoke to her in formal, ceremonial tones. Dr. Rahman translated for Sarah's benefit. He's officially welcoming her to the community and explaining the support system that has been established For her and Zara, they've prepared a home for them, arranged for continued medical care, and established a council of women elders who will serve as advisors and protectors. Sarah watched as Amara was embraced by women from the various communities. Despite their different tribal affiliations, they welcomed her as a sister and showed obvious excitement about helping to care for baby Zara. The formal ceremony that followed was unlike anything Sarah had ever witnessed. Representatives from each tribal community came forward to offer gifts and pledges of protection. The ceremony was conducted in multiple languages, reflecting the diverse groups that were participating in this unprecedented alliance. Most remarkable was the response to baby Zara herself. As different community leaders approached to see her, the infant remained calm and alert, as if she understood the significance of what was happening around her. Several of the elders commented on her unusual composure and the feeling of peace that seemed to emanate from her presence. Dr. Rahman had been documenting everything carefully, recognizing the historical importance of what they were witnessing. "Sarah, I don't think people fully understand what's happening here," he said quietly. "This is the first time these tribal communities have come together like this in living memory. If Zara's presence can inspire this kind of unity, perhaps there really is something prophetic about her birth." As the ceremony concluded, Sarah realized that her role in this extraordinary story was coming to an end. She had successfully completed her medical mission, ensuring that both Amara and Zara received the care they needed and were safely delivered to a community that would protect and nurture them. But as she prepared to leave, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she had been part of something much larger than a routine rescue operation. Whether through divine intervention, remarkable coincidence, or the fulfillment of an ancient prophecy, she had helped to bring together communities, preserve cultural traditions, and perhaps most importantly, ensure the survival of a remarkable mother and child whose story would be told for generations to come. Hassan approached Sarah before her departure and spoke to her through Dr. Rahman's translation. "He wants you to know that you will always be welcome in these communities," Dr. Rahman explained. "They consider you to be part of Zara's story now, and they hope you will return someday to see how she grows and develops." Sarah looked one last time at Amara and baby Zara, surrounded by their new community of protectors and supporters. The scene was one of hope, unity, and promise for the future. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Sarah was confident that this remarkable mother and child would face them with the strength that had already carried them through so much. 5 years later, Dr. Sarah Martinez returned to the mountain communities of Afghanistan, not as part of an emergency medical mission, but as an invited guest to witness something extraordinary. The invitation had come from Hassan, the tribal elder who had first recognized the significance of baby Zara, and it had taken Sarah months to arrange leave from her hospital duties to make the journey. The helicopter ride to the mountains was peaceful this time, conducted in perfect weather conditions with a pilot who knew the region well. As they approached the landing site, Sarah could see that the communities had grown and prospered in ways that defied the region's reputation for conflict and hardship. Dr. Rahman had joined Sarah for this return visit, having maintained contact with the mountain communities throughout the intervening years. His research into the historical and cultural significance of Amara and Zara's story had become the subject of academic papers and international interest. "You're not going to believe the changes that have taken place here," Dr. Rahman told Sarah as they prepared to land. "The unity that began with Zara's arrival has transformed the entire region. These communities have become a model for peaceful cooperation that's being studied by conflict resolution experts worldwide." As they stepped off the helicopter, Sarah was amazed by what she saw. The landing area was now a permanent structure, designed to accommodate regular visits from medical professionals, educators, and researchers. The communities had built a small clinic, a school, and what appeared to be a cultural center where the various tribal groups could come together. Hassan, now showing his advanced age but still vibrant and alert, was waiting to greet them. His welcome was warm and filled with obvious joy at seeing Sarah again. "Dr. Martinez," he said in carefully practiced English, "welcome back to the home of Zara, the bridge builder." Sarah was surprised and delighted to hear Hassan speaking English, and Dr. Rahman explained that the communities had been working to become more connected with the outside world, while maintaining their traditional cultures and values. As they walked through the settlement, Sarah could see children from different tribal backgrounds playing together, women from various communities working side by side on traditional crafts, and men from historically separate groups collaborating on construction and farming projects. "Hassan, this is incredible," Sarah said through Dr. Rahman's translation. "How did you achieve this level of cooperation?" Hassan's response was simple but profound. "When Zara arrived, she brought us hope. When we chose to protect her together, we learned that our differences were not as important as our shared values. The child became the symbol of what we could accomplish when we worked as one people instead of many separate tribes." They were approaching a beautiful building that appeared to serve as both a home and a community center. Traditional architectural elements from multiple tribal cultures had been incorporated into its design, creating something that honored all the communities while being entirely unique. "This is where Amara and Zara live," Dr. Rahman explained, "but it's also where the Council of Elders meets, where children from all the communities come for education, and where disputes are resolved through traditional mediation practices." As they entered the building, Sarah heard the sound of children's laughter and adult voices engaged in animated conversation. The interior was beautiful, with traditional tapestries and crafts representing all the tribal communities adorning the walls. And then Sarah saw her. Zara, now 5 years old, was sitting in the center of a group of children, leading what appeared to be a storytelling session. She had grown into a beautiful child with dark hair and bright, intelligent eyes that seemed to take in everything around her. What struck Sarah most was the way the other children responded to her, with obvious affection and respect, but also with a kind of reverence that suggested they understood she was special. When Zara noticed the new arrivals, she immediately stood and approached them with the poise and confidence of someone much older. She spoke first to Hassan in what Sarah assumed was the local language, then turned to Sarah and addressed her in clear, articulate English. "Dr. Martinez, my mother has told me many stories about you. Thank you for saving us and bringing us to our family." Sarah was stunned by the child's maturity and eloquence. 5-year-olds typically didn't speak with such clarity and emotional intelligence, and they certainly didn't usually demonstrate such awareness of complex situations. Amara appeared from another room, and Sarah was amazed by the transformation in the young woman she had first met 5 years earlier. Gone was the frightened refugee who had been fleeing an arranged marriage. In her place was a confident, gracious woman who carried herself with dignity and purpose. "Dr. Martinez," Amara said in improved English, embracing Sarah warmly, "welcome to our home. I have waited so long to show you what our life has become because of your kindness." As they sat together sharing traditional tea and food, Amara and Hassan explained the remarkable developments that had taken place since Zara's arrival. The child had indeed become a bridge between communities, but not in the mystical way the prophecies had suggested. Instead, her presence had inspired practical cooperation and mutual support. "Zara has a gift for understanding people," Amara explained. "When children from different communities disagree, she helps them find solutions. When adults have disputes, she often suggests approaches that no one else had considered. She doesn't solve the problems herself, but she helps others see new ways to solve them." Dr. Rahman had been documenting Zara's development over the years, and he shared his observations with Sarah. Her intellectual and emotional development has continued to be remarkable. She's fluent in 4 languages, excels academically at levels far beyond her age, and demonstrates leadership qualities that are truly extraordinary. Sarah spent several days in the mountain communities, observing Zara's interactions with people of all ages and from all the tribal groups. What she witnessed was indeed remarkable. The child seemed to have an intuitive understanding of human nature and conflict resolution that enabled her to help others find common ground. But perhaps most importantly, Zara was still clearly a normal, happy child who loved playing with friends, learning new things and spending time with her mother. The weight of expectations and cultural significance didn't seem to burden her. Instead, she appeared to embrace her role naturally and joyfully. On Sarah's final evening in the mountains, the communities organized a celebration in honor of her return visit. Representatives from all the tribal groups participated in traditional dances, music, and storytelling that honored both their individual cultures and their newfound unity. Zara performed a dance that incorporated elements from all the tribal traditions, symbolizing the way the communities had come together. Her performance was graceful and confident, and Sarah could see in her movements the same determination and strength that had enabled her mother to protect her during those critical first days of life. During the celebration, Hassan made a formal speech that Dr. Rahman translated for Sarah. He's explaining how the prophecy has been fulfilled, but not in the way anyone expected, Dr. Rahman said. Zara didn't use mystical powers to bring peace to the region. Instead, her survival and presence inspired people to choose cooperation over conflict. The real magic was in the human response to her story. As Sarah prepared to leave the next morning, Zara approached her with a small gift. A pendant similar to the one that had been in the leather pouch, but newly carved with symbols representing Sarah's role in their story. "This is for you," Zara said, "so you will remember that sometimes the most important journeys begin when we think we're just doing our jobs." As the helicopter lifted off and Sarah looked down at the thriving mountain communities below, she reflected on the extraordinary chain of events that had begun with a routine rescue mission. A young mother's, determination to protect her newborn child had not only ensured their survival, but had also inspired an entire region to choose unity over division. Whether or not ancient prophecies had been fulfilled, one thing was certain. Amara and Zara's story had become a powerful example of how love, courage, and community can overcome even the most challenging circumstances, and Sarah would carry the memory of being part of that story for the rest of her life. The helicopter disappeared into the clear mountain sky, leaving behind a region transformed by hope, a community united by shared purpose, and a remarkable young girl who had indeed become a bridge between worlds. Not through mystical powers, but through the simple, profound impact of human resilience and love.